Hey there. I'm Brianna Bowling. I am the founder of Retreat and Learn. If you are liking these educational interviews, I need your help. I need you to help spread the word. And the best way to do that is to hit subscribe on YouTube. You know the button's down there. You know where it is. Go get it. Or you can follow me on Facebook, or even more important, share these interviews with your friends. Share the love, share the education. While we are live today, you can post comments or questions in the comments, and we will answer them while we are live. If you're on YouTube, you just post it in the comments. If you're on Facebook, you post them in the comments, and we will ask those questions to Courtney today. I have so many ideas for books all day long. I keep coming up with new ones. Some are nonfiction, some are fictional, but there's so many of them that there is zero chance I am ever going to hit all of them, right? So I have pondered hiring a ghostwriter. And, just to get them to paper, let's see if we can get some of these actually published and out in the world. But I'm not really sure how ghostwriting works. It's just something I've pondered. So when I saw a friend post that her niece was a ghostwriter, guess what? I reached out to her to find out more, find out what ghostwriting really was. So I met Courtney Kelly. And Courtney Kelly is a writer, a ghostwriter, a copywriter, and she loves projects that create real pro social change. And that's our first question, Courtney. Heads up. I want to know what pro social is. Before she started her freelance career, she was the marketing director for a strength and conditioning company. She was a curriculum director for an education technology company. And she began her career as an English and Latin teacher. So education obviously is a very central theme in her life today. So with that said, I'm going to bring in Courtney real quick. And there you go. Hey, Courtney.
Hi. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your education and your knowledge and everything, because I really do want to help. I need to understand what ghostwriting is, and I want to be able to share that too. But I did kind of give you a heads up. I was reading your bio today, and I was looking at it, and I'm going, what exactly is pro-social? So before we get going, what is pro-social?
Yeah, so pro-social just refers to anything that is geared towards the advancement of like the group or society as a whole. So those are the kinds of projects that I'm really interested in, ones that are kind of tackling, either social issues or issues that kind of bridge maybe biology and sociology or
Ooh, okay.
linguistics and sociology, those type of
Okay.
things.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. I wasn't really sure, so I figured I'd better ask. So to start with, I know you and I talked about this just a little bit, but we didn't get into it a whole lot because I wanted to share our conversation for everyone else. What exactly is a ghostwriter? What do you do?
Yeah. So that is a great question. And there's a lot of, I think, misconceptions out there because publishing itself can be kind of a nebulous world. And there are so many different players involved from ideation with a book all the way to getting a book to the shelves. So what a ghostwriter does is, they specialize in actually producing the manuscript of either your book, or if you want to work with a ghostwriter for some shorter projects, they'll work with you to create articles,
Okay.
or yeah, or even like novellas or anything in between. But a ghostwriter is really someone that's taking your idea and putting that onto paper for you. So they're not necessarily the editor, the developmental editor, and they're not going to be that proofreader at the end. They're actually working with you pretty early on in the process of writing.
Okay. That was actually my next question is what's the best time for someone to reach out to you if they're thinking about having you work with them as a ghostwriter? Is it at the very beginning? Is it when they just literally are sitting there on their couch going, hey, you know what? I should write a book about, or is it after they do an outline, or is it after they've spoken to some people, or after they've done some research? Where exactly is the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah. So, okay. So, ghostwriters will kind of diverge on this point. For me, I really enjoy research. So, I'm happy to be someone that you reach out to if you have this idea, that you can get research for it. And you haven't necessarily done all the research. You need someone to be kind of your project partner in that stage. So for me personally, I'm totally down to kind of be there with you after you have the idea. It's been mulling around for a bit. You're ready to put some science behind it. I'm totally there. Some ghostwriters prefer to work with people who already have the research gathered, who already have an outline together. For fiction, maybe they have the plot kind of, pretty much laid out. So it depends. For me, I like being a part of that kind of collaborative ideation process, whether that's in fiction with the research or in nonfiction. In fiction with characters and plot, or nonfiction with research.
Okay, actually, you are really just leading right into my question. You're a writer or something. I don't know. So that was my next question are there certain ghostwriters, and I know we're talking about you in particular, but I'm in general in ghostwriting, are there ghostwriters that specialize in just fiction or just nonfiction? And how, does that matter? I mean, if they've only done fiction, can they do nonfiction? Or, as you're trying to find your ghostwriter, does that matter?
That is such a good question. And yes, so the short answer is there are ghostwriters that specialize in nonfiction or fiction, and even elements within nonfiction. So you might have someone who specializes in um, exercise and sports science within nonfiction. And maybe that's their wheelhouse. They feel comfortable with it. They've written a lot of books about it. And that's really where they want to keep their kind of like ghostwriting career. Other people, so this is kind of where I fall, are kind of interested in spanning the gamut between nonfiction and fiction. When it comes to whether, like, what matters more, kind of finding someone whose preferred project aligns with your preferred project, um, or finding someone who jives with you in terms of like your workflow, their workflow. You have similar outlooks on the importance of different elements. I would actually say the latter is more important. So I think it's.
When you say the latter, what do you mean by the latter? Because we went through a whole bunch of stuff there. I want to make sure we're talking.
I know, sorry. I just got excited. So what I mean by that is, so it, I think it's actually more important to find someone who is compatible with you in terms of the strengths that they bring to the table, the workflow that they typically engage in, and the values, the things they care about within writing, than it is to find someone who specializes specifically in exactly what you want to write. If you can meld those two together, that's incredible, and that's like the perfect project partner for you.
Okay.
But I actually think, ghostwriting projects, especially if it's a book, they're so long. They're typically at least 6 months long. And so you're working closely with this person for a long period of time on something that means a lot to you. And during the course of the work, it means a lot to them too.
Right.
So I think that actually what positions a ghostwriting and client team for success is more the personality types and the skill set that both bring to the table.
No, I think that's actually a really good point because, I spent a long time, running a company. And one of the things that I always told my managers when they were hiring people, and this is not, they weren't hiring ghostwriters, but they were hiring software engineers, but it's the same idea in that you can teach skills and you can teach knowledge and you can teach things, but you can't teach personality and work ethic. And so you hire work ethic and personality and you teach the skills. And I think that's kind of where you're going along, is that especially hiring a ghostwriter, in many cases, you are the expert. You're the person who you're bringing your knowledge to the ghostwriter. So they don't have to know your subject. You just have to get along really well with them.
Totally. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's a great analogy. I actually think, hiring a ghostwriter really should be treated like any other type of hire. it shouldn't be thought of as like, oh, well, this person's a contractor. And so, this is a one-time project. I just want to work with someone who has like, their resume has X, Y, or Z. Boom, that person has this. Great, we'll work together. That's rolling the dice on something that could be really difficult if you don't, just as you said, like if that, if the, work ethic or the perspective or the kind of skill set that this particular contractor, the ghostwriter, has doesn't align well with yours, it's just going to make things really difficult. And honestly, the foundation of any ghostwriter client relationship is communication.
Right.
So, yeah, so like starting from a place where you feel comfortable with this person, um, where they're like genuinely stoked about your project
Right.
is so important, more important than saying like, oh, well, this person has published like 5 or 6 books on like audiology or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let's go through the process from the beginning. I mean, really, truly from the beginning. So I have this book idea. I've been sitting there, and all of a sudden, I'm like going, "Aha! I have this great idea. I want to hire a ghostwriter. I'm sure this is the path to go." First, let's start with how do you find a ghostwriter? Like, is there a ghostwriter, yellow pages? Like, where do we find you?
Yeah. So, okay, so there's a lot of kind of different avenues. It's a little bit disorganized. It'd be cool if there was like a ghostwriter like coalition or guild.
Okay.
So you could tap into it there, but no, so there are some, for example, there are websites like Upwork where you can find or you can find many different profiles of ghostwriters.
What is Upward?
I think it's called Upwork.
Upwork. So
Yeah.
Upwork.
Yes.
And what is Upwork?
So Upwork is a website where I think actually not just freelance writers, but freelancers of all different trades
Okay.
can advertise through Upwork, they're kind of what they do, and people looking to collaborate with a freelancer can type in kind of their needs, and if the keywords match, your profile will kind of show to the top. So it's sort of an database of
Okay.
of
Right.
freelancers.
Excellent.
So yeah, so that is one way that you can find ghostwriters. There are some companies. So one is called Scribe, formerly known as Book in a Box,
Okay.
and they specifically market towards individuals who have a book idea and want help getting it to the shelves and kind of want this all-encompassing package of like, help me every step of the way. I want, maybe I want a ghostwriter. I also want you to give me the editor. I want the proofreader. I want the marketing team. I want the people to, I want the literary agent or the person acting as that. So that would be more of like a premium kind of experience, and they a company like that typically caters to like if you're a CEO and you really want to write a book, but you're running a company and you have
Yeah.
yeah
No
you
kidding.
don't
That would have been hard.
yes and you need like you have this idea, you have the research, you have the experience, but you need someone to do the kind of like the publishing work for you, as well as perhaps you want to work with a ghostwriter too. So that's another route. um, then there are ghostwriters such as myself that are kind of like operating on our own. We're doing our own marketing. And typically, I would say for my work, it has thus far been somewhat like word of mouth. And for me, I'll produce something for a client, and if that client's happy, they'll, talk to someone else who maybe
Right.
needs a book, and I've actually been really enjoying that because it allows me to be a part of this network, this growing network of people with researchers, creators, entrepreneurs that are interrelated or 3 degrees separated at the most, and so it's cool because we have kind of this foundation of um, Association,
All
which is
right,
awesome.
very good.
Yeah.
So when we're done with this interview, if you could send me the links to some of these different sites, I would love to post those in the comments for people as a resource. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we actually are starting to get some questions too from our audience. But beyond that, so the next step, so once you find somebody, or you find like maybe a collection of people, 2 or 3 people, are there particular questions that you should ask the ghostwriter to help basically interview them to find the best one for you?
Yes. Um, yes. So when I start working with my clients, I think it's really important to have a ghostwriter that's willing to sit down with you and have a conversation about your idea. And actually, so I know this is not questions you're asking per se, but you want the ghostwriter to be asking questions about your project.
Mm,
And I think that's really critical. I would shy away from someone who is listening to what you're saying and is like, yes, good, love it, totally can make this a book. Instead of being like, tell me more about this. I'm a little bit curious to hear more of your thoughts on this point. How are these two things related? You actually want them to kind of be
yeah,
challenging you a little bit, not in a way that's like, I know more than you, but just in a way that's like, they're genuinely curious to understand.
right. Well, that
Um,
makes perfect sense. Yeah.
yeah. So that's one thing is I think that initial conversation is really important, not just because you can gauge the ghostwriter's level of investment in your project and genuine level of excitement, but also you get that you just get a chance to kind of suss out their personality as well, and they get a chance to kind of engage with yours and make sure that there's like good working kind of chemistry. But some questions that are really important from like a logistical standpoint outside of that to ask a ghostwriter are, what services do you feel comfortable with? So, are you only comfortable with the manuscript? If so, how many revisions are you comfortable doing? How many rounds of revisions? What does your revision process look like?
Hmm.
How will I be involved in the revision process? How often will we be connecting? Um, you know, are you able so for your audience members who might be wanting to write a book that they send to a traditional publisher, another great thing to ask is, do you help with pitches? Do you help with book
Mhm.
proposals? Do you help with kind of those other elements of um, writing that aren't necessarily within the manuscript, but have to do with the book's
Okay.
final kind of like stages towards publishing. Um, and then to see, if you are someone who, and this is actually the kind of person that I love these sorts of projects again. Like if you're someone that has an idea and you've got the research or you have the characters in mind and stuff, but you want help like structuring it and organizing it. I love that kind of thing. Not all ghostwriters do, so it's important to ask if that's something you're looking for. Um, is the ghostwriter comfortable, or do they typically include within their services research and kind of organization of the book and stuff? So those are some of the logistical questions that I would ask.
Okay.
Um, I also, if you have a deadline, I would just ask the ghostwriter, hey, does this seem reasonable with the content that I'm telling you? Um, if you don't know how long you'd like your book to be, talk with the ghostwriter about that. They typically
Mm,
have a good idea of um, like word counts and page numbers and that kind of thing.
right.
If you do, just make sure that um, the timeline and the page, the word count, all of that makes sense to the ghostwriter and that they feel confident that they can deliver within that timeline.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so leading up to a conversation about price, those are all the things that I would make sure to talk with them about.
Okay, so we're going to get a little bit further into that, but I do want to get to some of the questions that we've had. And feel free, anybody who's watching, ask away. I mean, we usually go about a half hour, but if we go longer, we go longer. If we have more questions, we're okay with that. So we did have a question from, let's see if we can show it here. That is it hard to develop a voice of the person that you're writing for? So once you start that project, how hard is it to actually develop a voice of someone, especially maybe that you don't know, um, and didn't quite have the thought process of the person that you're writing for?
Great question. Also, hi, it's Katie. So great question. And this is another reason why this dovetails perfectly with why that conversation with your ghostwriter is so important. Also, another thing that I forgot to say, when you're researching ghostwriters, make sure to check out, they should have samples of their writing. So check out their
Mm,
previous work,
right.
knowing that voice is something that's mutable and a ghostwriter should be skilled in adopting different voices. um, it's something you want to look for in their writing to see if they can like kind of use different types of voices in different types of settings. Um, so sorry, that was something for a person looking for a ghostwriter, but from my perspective, um, I really love diving into someone's voice, and I actually find it in some ways. This is uh, going to sound super counterintuitive, but it's just kind of the way it is. I find it easier sometimes than expressing my own voice in my own
Hmm.
writing. And I think the reason for that is there's so much internal chatter that I might have about my own voice. What is that? It's
Right.
been in my head for so long, you can, overanalyze it versus when you're talking with someone, when you develop this relationship with them. And you also, a ghostwriter should be asking you questions like, who's your audience? How do you typically speak to them? How would you like to speak to them? That kind of stuff. It's actually, um, for me personally, I find it to be really a really kind of exciting thing. I think it's fun. It's fun, and it's another reason why that like great working relationship is so important. Um, because voice is one of those things that's so nuanced and complex that really what it comes from is deeply listening to the person that you're working with.
Hmm.
Um, so sometimes I come to places just like with any other piece of writing where I'm, you know, let's say I'm writing about some research and the research is new to me. So I'm trying to synthesize it. And at the same time, I'm trying to do that with someone else's voice in mind. Then things can get complicated and I'll have to go over a section many times to make sure like, okay, I've communicated this clearly. It's accurate, it's precise, and it sounds the way that we want it to sound. So, good question.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think it's difficult. I find that I write on my own too. And voice is hard. And sometimes you start getting into the voice. It's hard sometimes to even get out of that voice too. Like you start
Yes.
carrying that voice into your other character. You're like, wait a minute,
Yes.
not that's supposed to be there. Let's segment these two. They're two different people. So I can see that would definitely be an issue. All right, so we had one other question, and honestly, I'm gonna put it up. But so this is from our John Doe. So they did want to know what a summary of the ghostwriter is, and we did cover that at the beginning. So I'm not going to cover it again for the other people that are watching. But John, at the end of this, there is going to be a replay. So certainly just I don't know, rewind. I don't think it's really rewinding anymore, but and go to the beginning. And we did get a summary of what that is. So thanks for the question. That's a great one. Okay, so I have a question in terms of, and this is something that I was thinking about. Let's say that it seems like everything's going great. You're getting into the project, and I'm assuming there's like probably some milestones that, certain first draft, first section, first paragraph, first chapter, and you're kind of getting into the project. And I don't even know if you can answer this really, but it's not going well on either end. And so on the side of the ghostwriter and the side of the person who's hired the ghostwriter, do you have any recommendations on how to fix that?
Yes. Okay, good question. Hmm. So I think one of the most important things is identifying what's not going well. So, and kind of sussing out the origins of that. So, one scenario that I know is definitely something that's happened before is, um, let's say a ghostwriter is producing. So, typically, I like to produce in segments, and for me, the segments are about a chapter. Typically, if we're working on a book, and let's say, you know, um, I usually, I always wrap up 2 rounds of edits into the full kind of like package. So let's say we've gone through 2 rounds of edits and my client still is not happy with a segment that I've delivered. And we've talked about it and I'm confused. I don't know. I feel like I'm delivering what I'm supposed to deliver. The client's confused because they think that they're communicating super clearly and I'm not understanding. I think the first step is to kind of have a conversation because um, it it might be less of a content thing and more of a misunderstanding about the process
Mhm.
thing. So where a ghostwriter might say like, I might think, for example, okay, first round of edits, that's like the sort of big picture developmental stuff. And I expect after I follow the directions that the second round of edits will be more proofreading. Well, if my client isn't familiar with kind of this editing process and they think, oh, well, this first round, I just really caught what was wrong with the first paragraph. But the second round, I caught what was wrong with the second paragraph. And then the third round, I saw something at the
Mhm.
end. And so then there's like a mismatch of understanding about the process.
Right.
Um, and that's why I think having a conversation about that is really important. Um, and you know, there will, I mean, with any working relationship, there will always be some points of like maybe friction's the wrong word, but just like misunderstanding, miscommunication, whatever. I mean, you know, let's say like if I'm working with someone who also runs a company, they have a million other things going
Right.
on, and maybe I have a couple writing projects, and every now and again, some things can get misaligned.
Yeah, that makes sense. I
Um,
mean, usually almost everything comes down to communication. And I think that's a really great point that you're making, and that just
yeah,
taking a step back and recommunicate and realign the mission, just as you
yeah.
did at the beginning of the project. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Mm.
and for what it's worth too, I think that's why that those initial conversations and really being open and upfront about what you want and giving the ghostwriter space to be open and upfront about what they want and expect as well is so important.
Right.
I know it's really made such a difference in these long-term projects. It's made them go really smoothly. It's made them um, really productive on both people's ends in terms of like the amount of enjoyment and the amount of kind of fulfillment that both people feel within the project.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I do think those conversations are so important if you can have them on the front end. Um, and, you know, if you're someone that's working with a ghostwriter and things aren't working out and you keep communicating and it doesn't seem like it's
Right.
working out, um, you know, there are it's not worth it to you or the ghostwriter to continue a partnership that's not working.
Right.
So I think, you know, ultimately, like if that needs to happen, I think both, you know, being honest on both sides
Right.
and everything will is important, and typically like what happens in that scenario will be drawn up in the contract,
Right.
which happens in the beginning of the project as well.
Which is, the contract is obviously one of the most important parts of the communication, is it puts it in
Yes.
writing, which it's like, good fences make good neighbors, good contracts make good relationships too. So
Yes.
very
Yes.
important part. So we have two more items that I just want to hit, and we can just hit them lightly. I mean, I don't know that we have to get into it in real depth, but one of them is time and the other one is cost.
Mhm.
So in general, so let's take a novel, a fiction novel that, is an autobiography. that I guess it's really not really to be a biography kind of because it's a ghostwriter, but how long is that from the day that you write up the contract to the time that you finish, generally the range of time that that would take?
Yeah. So I would say typically projects like that would run. So for fiction and nonfiction, a lot of the books that you'll find on the shelves are within like the 50,000 word to maybe like 120,000 word range,
Hmm.
and nonfiction tends to be a little bit more narrow,
Right.
closer to like 75,000. And what that means is you're looking at anything between like 200 pages to like 375 in that area.
Right.
Um, so I like to think of like a happy medium as 75,000 words, 300 pages about. And that would take you anywhere between, well, for me, typically it's like a 6 month to a year project. And actually, it for me, if it's the same like word count and the same pages, um, the the reason that one project might take a year and one project might take 6 months has more to do with what's happening like in the client's life at
Right.
that point. Like they might not be available to read through segments every single week. And
Right.
if not, you're going to have a couple weeks where maybe you're waiting on some revisions and stuff like that. And
Right.
yeah, so
No, that makes sense. I mean, it
yeah,
depends on the client in terms of how fast they can get things back to you too. So they're part
yes,
of that equation. But that gives
right,
you an idea. It's about a yearish. It would be,
yeah,
to don't expect a book to be turned out in 2 weeks.
right,
Important to
yes.
know. Expectations. And then in terms of cost, which I think could be a huge range too. I think that's like very much like asking like how much does a house cost or how much does a car cost? There's a huge range, but in general, if somebody is going to think about hiring somebody to write, again, we'll go to the same scenario, a 300-page biographical, some type of biography book. What would be the range of hiring a ghostwriter? Do you have any idea? Like, I mean, in terms of out in the market?
Hmm. Yeah, so the the short answer is anywhere from literally $2,000 to over six figures,
No, and that
which
makes
is
sense to me. Same with
which
a house. How much is a house? From $5,000 to many, many millions. Yeah.
yes. So it's a really wide range. And just some benchmarks that can help. If you're paying for someone who's a ghostwriter anywhere between, I would say, 2,000 to 9,000, typically you're working with someone that wants you to have all of the information, the outline. They just want to get the manuscript to you. Um, it in terms of like quality and creative output, it's I would say this is this is maybe someone who's not as experienced, or maybe they're
Right.
more focused on quantity than quality.
Right.
Um, for a mid-range ghostwriter, you're looking at something more like 25,000 to like 65,000
Okay. That
for a
gives
book.
me a good idea. Okay.
Yeah. And then the six-figure cost typically is someone who has some bestsellers under their belt,
Right.
or yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. They have some good credentials to put behind those six figures. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So I think for me, that wraps up the general, like, hey, the beginnings of, hey, if I'm thinking of hiring a ghostwriter, these are some things I need to think about. This is how I hire somebody. These are some questions I need to think about. This is how I find a ghostwriter. This is how long it's going to take. And this is how much it's going to cost. To me, those are the first initial big questions. And you've answered them all and you've answered them wonderfully. And I so much appreciate you sharing
Oh,
that information with people. This is going to be out on YouTube and Facebook indefinitely, so people can use it as a resource going forward. Those are the end of our questions. If there's any other questions, you have like about 2 seconds to throw them out there, people, and that's about it. And we're going to sign off. Is there anything that you would like to add, including how do people reach you? And we will put that into the comments as well, of course. And actually, I'm going to show that right down here too. But beyond that, website address, is there any other way that they should reach you or anything you would like to add?
um, Yes, actually. Okay, so one thing that I think is important to recognize with a ghostwriter too. There's this sort of conception that hiring a ghostwriter in some ways is like a cop out, is like something that people, like, oh, well, I should write it, you know? And I'm not like, if you want to write it, go for it. Like, absolutely go for it.
Sure.
But I do want to say that a ghostwriter is not just like, in some ways, they're a lot more like a coach. That's how I sort of view my work. Is I'm working with you. You're the expert, and we're working together to kind of create this thing that you've always wanted to make, and I'm more the like uh, sort of megaphone through which your voice, your
Hmm.
ideas, and your experiences can be efficiently put down on paper if you've got other things going on, or if you really want a collaborator whose main skill is within writing. So that's something that I also wanted to say is I have encountered that too, where people are like, oh, I feel kind of weird about
They
working with a
shouldn't,
ghostwriter.
though. I think
Yeah,
it's very similar to what you just said. So, like, if somebody is a plumber, let's say they're a plumber and they are really good at plumbing and they want to share their knowledge about plumbing, you don't know how to do plumbing. And that's
right.
perfectly legitimate that you don't know how to do plumbing, but they can share their knowledge with you and then you can share their plumbing knowledge with the world. Just because they're a great plumber does not make them a good writer. And, and so,
Yes.
yes, everybody has their skills and that's your skill. And thank goodness you're available to help us with these things and getting our knowledge out there in the world. So, yes,
Oh, thanks.
100% agree.
Yeah. So that's just something I wanted to say as well. Just because it's something I've encountered too, just in conversations with people. So yeah. So it's like you get a creative sidekick. It's not,
Yeah,
yeah.
team.
So which is cool. In terms of finding me, if you just want to say hi or look into some work that I've done in the past, um, or if you are someone who's interested in, if you interested in a ghostwriter, you want to talk more about it and just explore what that might look like working with me. My website is courtneykellywrites.com. And I'm happy. I would
And
love
it's
to
right
hear
down
from you.
there in
Yeah.
case you can't find it.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's all. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. I think the world of publishing and writing in general is so interesting, and I'm always learning. I mean, there's so much to learn about it. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Well, thank you so, so much. And thank you all of you for joining in today and asking some great questions and supporting, Courtney today in terms of her interview today. So it is sometimes a little frightening coming on to these live interviews. So thank you for being here with us today. And please, if you have been watching today, the majority of people who watch these educational videos are not subscribers to my channel. So hit subscribe. So, all right. Well, thanks so much, Courtney. And we will talk again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.